Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Adam White and Jeremy Smith. Love is in the air, and what can romance be without Paris? Well, hopefully some Parisians can bring that city of love feeling to what will be likely a rainy Manchester. But before that, and the Ligue 1 weekend that was, here are the latest headlines. Marseille made it 2 wins in a row for the first time since November as they won away at Dijon 2-1. Jordan Murray put the hosts ahead, but goals from Mario Balotelli and Lucas Ocampos sealed the win for Lorraine. On Saturday, Paris Saint-Germain got back to winning ways in the league, at least with a 1-0 victory over Bordeaux. Many big names were rested ahead of their trip to Old Trafford to face Manchester United tomorrow, but they did not come out completely unscathed, with goalscorer Edinson Cavani a serious doubt with a hip injury. Elsewhere, Amiens claimed a huge 3 points as Moussa Konaté's goal for the first time as he started since October, earned them a 1-0 win over fellow strugglers Caen, who fall into the relegation zone, while Strasbourg lose for only the second time in 2019 as Angers took a 2-1 victory. On Sunday, Monaco were denied a second win in a row under the second reign of Leonardo Jardim as Andy Delors' late penalty helped Montpellier to a 2-2 draw, while Jemison saw red in the final moments, while Nîmes came from 2 goals down against Nantes in the first half to fight back in the second period to win 4-2, with late goals from Jordan Ferry and Salah Tioub. Lille extended their lead in second, at least, as they beat bottom side Guingamp 2-0, while Rennes prepared for their Europa League tie with Real Betis with a thumping 3-0 victory over Saint-Etienne. In the final match of the weekend, Lyon followed up last week's big win with another slip-up as Nice won 1-0 at home. Remy Walter's second half penalty was enough for Patrick Vieira's men to join the melee of 4 teams on 37 points, fighting it out for the Europa League spot. And that's all for now, but do keep up to date with the news in the world of French football. The best way to do that is heading over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with a look forward to that Champions League game coming up tomorrow evening as Paris Saint-Germain will be taking on Manchester United. And Adam, they prepared for that with a somewhat fortunate, but also you could have said maybe on another occasion it could have been 2, 3 or 4 against a Bordeaux side that didn't really test what was a weakened Paris Saint-Germain side, but more concerning for them really is they probably wanted to get out of this game, as you could see from the starting lineup they chose, without any further injuries, but unfortunately that's not quite been the case.
No, it hasn't. As you mentioned in the build-up there, that Edinson Cavani is out. Thomas Meunier as well. Not that he would have started, but another injury concern for PSG. And obviously, although those are the only 2 aside from Neymar, it's pretty affecting for Thomas Tuchel. Because I was sort of thinking about this today, and he sort of Tuchel started off with this sort of a very sort of fluid idea about what he was going to choose for his sort of setup and his formation. He sort of used a 4-3-3, a 4-2-3-1, a 3-5-2, and variants of the 3-man centre back. And he settled on this 4-2-2-2, I guess it is, with 2 defensive midfield or 2 sort of sitting midfielders and 2 attacking sort of wide-ish midfielders, which are usually Di Maria and Neymar, and then 2 strikers. And it sort of suits all of their better players, PSG. And gets the best out of them. And even if that means pushing Marquinhos into midfield, it's worked well, and it's still adaptable enough for them to sort of adopt varying approaches. But without Neymar, that could have been covered by how well Julian Draxler's playing. You could slot him into very similar to the left-hand side of those 2 attacking midfielders. But without Edinson Cavani, it really throws off the balance of the setup. And Kylian Mbappe is without a partner. Unless you field Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, but he had a poor game at the weekend, and I don't know if he's suited to starting a game of this magnitude. although a thoroughly decent player, but whether he's a Champions League knockout starter is another question. So it really means that Tuchel's going to have to rethink his not necessarily his approach. He can play in a similar way, but the style of the setup is going to have to change and pretty rapidly. I guess thinking along those lines in such a short space of time, having expected Cavani and Mbappe to be paired up front for this game, and it's sort of the whole team kind of built around that kind of idea. Changing those ideas is going to be tough, and Cavani's arguably as big a miss as Neymar as a result, given that it's going to instigate quite a lot of change in the team, and it looks like such a weaker 11 even without Cavani in it. The probable setup that L'Equipe have been talking about just looks like such a weaker team than PSG have been fielding for the rest of the year. So not for the first time they're sort of hamstrung by injuries when it really matters the most. In fact, the only time it matters for them is this round, the quarterfinals, these two games that have sort of defined their season so far in the last 3 or 4 years. So a massive miss, arguably as big as Neymar, and it arguably makes Manchester United favourites now.
And it throws a couple of extra spanners in the works, really, Jez, because other than obviously the missing of Neymar, I don't think Meunier is going to be an enormous miss, because you would expect Dani Alves to be the one starting, really, given the previous experience. But at the same time, when you add into the fact that Verratti's back in the side, but has only just come back from what has been a pretty lengthy layoff, which is unsurprising for the Italian, really, in recent years, unfortunately. And then the space next to him in midfield, Marquinhos was rested completely at the weekend, but whether he'll come in or whether they would try and risk someone like Paredes straight away into the side, it sort of throws off a little bit of the pattern. And then the other question mark is, and it seems like a strange one given his talent as well, is Mbappe through the middle on his own. It's not really a role he's been used to. I mean, his best work has sort of worked in a 2, or I suppose a right of a 3 at least, but it poses some interesting questions, not just with those players missing, but what to do with those players that have come back and what to use them for.
I think Mbappe is obviously what a brilliant player he is, and perhaps more importantly, what a brilliant big game player he is. I don't think he'd have any trouble playing the lone role up front, although obviously it's not ideal because he's played in the centre before, but usually with someone else, and this is relatively new to him. I think he can probably adapt. The problem is the other players around him. The ideal would have been obviously to have Cavani there, not only because you've got a dual threat of 2 world-class goal scorers, and Cavani really has been in superb form since the turn of the year, but you've also got Mbappe coming in from the right. And as it is, PSG have been certainly hamstrung by injuries, but yet again, we say every year that this is the most important match of the year for them, and yet again, it feels a bit like certain chickens are coming home to roost. And while it is really bad luck that Verratti, Neymar, and Cavani are out, the fact that they're having to play with Marquinhos, who's a defender in midfield, and it looks like Alves, who's a defender even further forward, I think it also speaks a lot about the mistakes that they've made in the transfer market in the last few years. And my concern is, I still think there'll be a threat going forward. They've still got players who can score goals. I think Di Maria's been in good form this year, and Draxler obviously isn't a Neymar as he himself acknowledged today, but I still think he's a very talented footballer. But another thing that worries me about the fact that Cavani isn't there is that he's always been the first line of defence. I was reading some stats today about how I think between the 2 matches against Strasbourg and Rennes recently, he actually intercepted 6 passes, and it's his harrowing, which firstly kind of is sort of not an obstruction, but it stops the opponent setting off on attack freely, and having to play much more one-touch football from their own area, which is always a risk. But it also gives the rest of the PSG team the chance to get back in position. And considering there'll be a few players playing in unfamiliar positions, and also players like Verratti, who, as we said, is not entirely match fit yet, that kind of extra time, extra panic, if you want, from the other side would have been really important to PSG, I think, and that's my concern as much as anything else. As I know we've always joked about it, and during periods of bad form on his part, we said, "Oh, Cavani would be a better right back than a striker," that kind of thing. Flippancy aside, he's a fantastic striker, but I think he's so much more important than that for PSG. And for me, that's another concern. They're losing their first line of defence, and I don't think Mbappe is going to be minded to track back, and there's no reason really why he should do as the central striker. But Alves, although he's a defender in name, I'm still not 100% sure about his sort of defensive discipline if he's playing a forward role. Di Maria shows good heart, but isn't the strongest defender. And it's another concern going into the match, and I kind of agree with Adam. I'm not sure about Man United being favourites, but there's no doubt that this tie is a hell of a lot closer than it looked like it was going to be when the draw was made.
Absolutely. And coming back to you really quickly, Jez, before we talk about the team they're facing, really, thinking about PSG and the fact that they are missing Neymar and now Cavani as well. So a lot of the attacking impetus has been done. And we know how positive PSG tend to try and play, but we also saw how badly that worked in the Champions League against a team like Liverpool that were on a big high and do have speed on the counter-attack, which is very much the kind of play that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is looking to try and do, in that speed on the attack that Manchester United at the moment. Does maybe Tuchel think about switching the mentality of the players to maybe, especially while they're away from home without those two available, to maybe being a little bit more conservative and maybe trying to, like say, hit them on the break rather than being so gung-ho? Or is that not something that PSG can do?
I think that PSG, I mean, obviously they shouldn't go gung-ho, but I think they should play to their strengths. And for me, even without Neymar and Cavani, I still think their strength is going forward. I still worry about that defence. I know it's a moot point now because Meunier is injured, but I just don't understand how either Kehrer, who I think is talented but very raw, or Alves could ever be considered a starter ahead of Meunier. I still think Marquinhos, not to the same extent as how we've spoken about Luis Gustavo at Marseille, but I still think playing Marquinhos in midfield, it doesn't. You can't say it weakens the midfield because there's no other options, but it's not his best position, and I think it's taken PSG's best defender out of defence. And I worry that Man United's midfield could overrun PSG's midfield in the form that Pogba's in at the moment. I worry a bit about Martial against Kehrer as well. I think both teams. It reminds me, in a way, of when Monaco and Man City played each other a couple of years ago. It feels like there's absolutely no doubt there's going to be a lot of goals in this tie, because I'm very unconvinced about both defences, but I think both attacks are very impressive. And yeah, I'd worry a bit about PSG sort of trying to keep it tight, because I'm not 100% sure they're capable of doing so.
Just as hit on a point which I was going to bring to yourself, Adam, really, that their opponents, Manchester United, have been in a great run of form under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. 24 points from 27 available so far in the Premier League, at least through the Cup, as well against Arsenal, which is not always the easiest tie sometimes, and a tie against Chelsea to come in the games against Liverpool, so they're coming thick and fast for them. And I know you watch them as much as I do, to be fair, but they have been really entertaining to watch again, but still there is that twinge of concern. Even in the win against Fulham that ended up being 3-0, there was still plenty of chances for the home side in that game, and that still should give cause for concern.
Yeah, from a Manchester United point of view, definitely. I think you can still create chances against them. And although Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has done brilliantly and he's done the right thing and played to his squad strengths, which is definitely not what Mourinho did. Although I have a feeling, I've always had a sort of a slight sort of misunderstanding of how the board thought Jose Mourinho was going to play out. If you get Jose Mourinho, you know he wins the way that Jose Mourinho wins, and you get him the players that make Jose Mourinho win. You buy him experienced players you buy him the defenders he wants. And you let him do it his way, otherwise, it all implodes, which is inevitable. And to not get him the players that he wanted, which meant the United defence is pretty weak. It just seemed suicidal to me. I didn't really understand that at all. But in the cases carried over to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's tenure, the defence remains a little bit porous. And right, Fulham, there was one or two chances very early on at Craven Cottage, which perhaps Fulham should have taken. It might have been a different game if they had. But I've been impressed with Victor Lindelof over the last few months. I think he's really grown into the role and assumed responsibility that perhaps he either wasn't given the opportunity to, or perhaps was a little bit inexperienced to, previously having signed from Benfica. He's been really good, although he lacks a partner. And I think that whoever plays alongside him, whether it's Bailly or Jones or Smalling, they can be got at by whoever plays up front for PSG. And although Shaw and Young are very competent players, and I like Luke Shaw, I think he's a really good defender and is very well suited to a left back role in a four. Not particularly good at wing back, but I think you could get in behind both those players. So I think there are opportunities there for PSG, absolutely. And Matic is not particularly mobile. Herrera's liable to get himself booked if not sent off. So I think there are opportunities there, but it's whether these two teams go punch for punch, if you like, and who's got the most firepower, I think. But so I think this is one area that PSG can be positive about, because I think their defense is clearly better than Manchester United's. But this is counteracted by the fact that Manchester United have a little bit more experience in playing against teams who will do things to them that PSG will try and do, if you see what I mean, whereas PSG don't. And I think Thiago Silva is a really good example of this. He's improved this season to a certain point, looked like the player that the rest of the world thinks he still is, even though he hasn't been for several years in France. But in recent times, he started to look nervy, and you in the last few games, you put him under pressure, he and those alongside him. Jez mentioned that Kerr is still pretty raw. Marquinhos isn't playing in defence. Kimpembe, I think, has been poor for quite a while in that defence too. I argue it's still superior to Manchester United's, but I think there are opportunities there for Rashford and Martial and Pogba to get at them too.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I just have that feeling that the key battle, I think Joe's pointed out earlier, is that Pogba's in such great form. Will Marquinhos be good enough as a defensive midfielder to keep him out of the game? Because if he can keep him quiet and not allow him to start dictating games, because even even though if he has a quiet first half, he seems to slowly get into it as he gets more and more space. So if Marquinhos can shut him down, it makes a massive difference to Manchester United. But let's get some predictions. I'm pretty sure both of you seem like you're leaning towards high-scoring games, which I'm thinking as well. So do tune in on tomorrow night. Jez, what do you think the score will be?
You build me up now, but
yeah.
I'm not sure that high scoring, but 3 goals. I think 2-1 to Man United.
Adam?
3-1 Man United, I think.
I'm going to be more conservative and say 2-2. I think that it just feels that now against more quality opposition that defence of Manchester United might be tested a little bit stronger. But I just feel like as well the midfield of Manchester United at the moment just might sort of overrun that midfield of PSG, depending on obviously how Tuchel sets up. If it's maybe a 3-man midfield, they might have a little bit more security, but it's certainly going to be an interesting one to watch. On to matters back in League, and we're going to really focus on the relegation fight this evening, because it's starting to slowly hot up, and even for a couple of the sides, they have games coming up in the next couple of weeks. Can't play on Wednesday night on one of their rescheduled games against Nantes, and then the week after, Guingamp have their game in hand against Bordeaux, and both of them really need them at the moment, really, Jez, because both of them are in the bottom two, as you would need, but they're starting to see others pick up points. But starting with Guingamp, who had their moments against Lille really at the weekend. They were a little bit unfortunate in the first half. Rafael Leao was pretty good as well, but they went behind, and then they had a couple of chances in the second half, and Lille only got that second goal in the sort of dying moments. But it's another one of those opportunities slipped away, and with them also going sort of through in the cup, it's almost like a distraction for them as they head into sort of the finals of that. At least they're out of the Coupe de France, but it's starting to dig into their own hole. And like you say, like we've said about Monaco the last couple of weeks, it's not an insurmountable mountain to climb. But as the games tick by and the chances keep going, it's getting more and more desperate for them to actually do something about it.
Yeah, the problem is that each week, even if it's only one of their relegation rivals keeps winning. Obviously, that's more likely to happen as they start playing each other. But in recent weeks, Amiens, Dijon, Monaco, they've all grabbed the win somewhere, and Guingamp aren't. And while they're sort of just about clinging on, it's gradually, that 17th place or even 18th is just gradually getting a little bit further and further away. And as you said, they can sort of cling on, at least in terms of say Amiens and Monaco, they can cling on to the fact that they've got a game in hand, but possibly at that end of the table at this stage of the season, you'd rather have points. And I think they are improving. They're looking a little bit tighter at the back, and they're showing some hints of talent at the front. I've said before, I've never been absolutely convinced about Thuram, but I actually think he is starting to lead the line quite well. But they just look a little bit short of options, and I guess it's hard to judge them against Lille because Lille are kind of rampant at the moment. And you look at Lille's goal. I think when teams are starting to score goals which involve dummies, I think that really shows that they're at the top of their game, and that the front players are really on the same sort of kind of telepathic level, and that's always going to be hard to play against. And then, as you said, when Guingamp did have chances, Thuram scored, and it was, I think, rightly just ruled offside. Mendy got a touch, he was offside, and then when it looked certain that they'd scored, Maignan just came out with an outstanding save. So that there's frustrations there because they're not playing that badly, but they've just left themselves with a lot to do. And I mean, you look at the matches they've got in the next few weeks. There are winnable matches. I think the next two, Lyon, Bordeaux, are tough, but the next four really are winnable. And I think those four, they've got Angers and Nantes at home, Toulouse away, and then Dijon home. I think they really need to get a decent haul from those. If they fail to, then I think they're probably gone.
Yeah, Adam, much like Jez is saying, it starts to get desperate, and you think that all those games leading up to the cup final really are really crucial for them, because if they don't start getting a run there, and let's say, regardless of what happens in that cup final, they're sort of out of the league picture for a moment, and the pressure comes back on again. And when you've only got 8 games left after that, regardless of the sort of opponent they have left, it will depend on who's above them. I mean, in that last run-in, they've got Caen still there, and they've got Amiens to face on the last day of the season. But you don't want to be relying on those kind of games at that stage of the season, do you?
No, I don't think you do. And I think for Guingamp, you're absolutely right. I mean, there are opportunities, coming up, and the I think with the cup final, it's going to be. It's almost bad. It's almost a hindrance. It's almost something that's going to get in the way of their focusing on their survival fight. I don't know that necessarily it's a positive in sort of general terms, but I don't know if it's conducive to the rest of the season playing out as they would hope, because I'm sure that the club, pretty much everybody at the club, would take survival over. Well, maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they wouldn't take survival over winning the cup, but they certainly take survival over the final. And I just feel that when teams get in this situation, that then a lot of focus seems to be sort of moved towards that big game, and it detracts from other games. Players perhaps not wanting to get injured, perhaps questions are asked more about that game in the press, and managers and players are thinking about it more, and it just sort of detracts. And for Guingamp's point of view, I think one of their biggest worries is that everybody above them is going to get away from them, because they're obviously the bottom two go down. The third place is a playoff place, but I think from Toulouse upwards, everybody should be pretty confident of staying up. Toulouse in 14th with 27 points, and then Nantes are obviously a little bit of an unusual case, because it's going to the club obviously have going to be completely devastated by the Emiliano Sala situation, and it'd be difficult to see how that affects the rest of their season, and not to mention the fact that they're kind of lacking a striker. Which it's I don't know if Khalifa Koulibaly is going to be able to fill those very, very big shoes from the first half of the season. So they might get sucked in. But I would imagine Amiens have got enough to stay up. I think Godos and Konate are a really good partnership, and now they're both back in the team. They got the goal at the weekend, and a brilliant cross and a fantastic header. If they stay fit, I think they'll be fine. I think they're the quality that keep them up. Dijon are perhaps a worry, but Monaco will be fine. I think now that Jardim's back and they've got such better players in over the transfer window. So it's really only Caen, Dijon, and Gangon I can see being sort of fighting out at the bottom. And I would argue that Caen and Dijon just have better teams. They've just got much more quality. And Dijon in particular, with Anton Kambare, I'd expect him to keep them up. So I'm worried that that Gangon could get sort of stranded whether they start winning or not, and that situation could accentuate itself before the cup final and around whatever happens there. So they need to find some way to switch their focus back towards the league. But I don't know if that's possible, and it might be too late by the time that this foray around the League Cup final is over.
Yeah, it's getting, like I say, whenever a team is at the bottom of the league, it starts getting bleaker and bleaker and bleaker. But looking at the team just above them, Jez, and Adam's touched upon the game that they played at the weekend, really, and we'll talk about Amiens again with Adam in a moment. But we talked about on the previous show how big a game it was between Caen and Amiens, and it was much as we really anticipated, it was pretty bad, to be fair. The game didn't really have that many moments, but it was the two players that we pointed out were missing from Amiens and made the difference. And at the moment, that's what Caen are missing. And at the same time as well, there was a report on West France the other day, yesterday actually, that the boss, Fabien Merchilal, who's been told to win 6 points from the next 3 league games or face the sack. And those games are the games that we mentioned previously against Nantes, against Strasbourg, against Toulouse are really important. But at the same time, if he does go after those 3 games, if he doesn't pick up the 6 points, it's a real gauntlet of PSG, Rennes, Saint-Etienne and Monaco for a new manager to come in. So they seem like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place now.
Yeah, I think that the weekend match kind of summed up exactly what is going to keep the team up and what might condemn them. We've seen it before. We talked last year about how important Toko Ekambi was for Angers. We talked, as Adam just alluded to, how important Salah was for Nantes, scoring half their goals. And we might touch on it later. It feels like I agree with Adam that I think Toulouse just about got enough, but how many times does it feel like Gradel has saved them when no one else is capable of scoring? The fact that Amiens have got Konate back and fit might be absolutely crucial. He's a classy striker, and he showed again in a match with very few chances created from either side. A really good, strong, clever header was the difference between the teams. And I think we've said so many times on this show how Caen have got these middling strikers in Bovu and Crivelli and Bamu, but I'm not sure any of them are quite good enough. In Bovu's case, maybe not good enough anymore to sort of really step up and score those important goals that are going to keep them up. And a lot of the season I think does rest on the next 3 matches. Because, as you said, the 4 after that look really tough, and whether it's Mercadal or someone else, I don't think it makes much difference. I think he's probably doing as well as can be expected with the squad that he's got, and I'm not sure anyone else could do any better. I know that Garon pulled it out of the bag the last couple of years, but at some point they're gonna run out of lives.
Yeah, and it feels strange for them to do an ultimatum on those kind of games, because while they are ones that they really want to be picking up points and winning, it seems like the man coming in is just going to get the same problems that those next 4 games. You're really lucky if you're going to be picking up 2 points, really, never mind any sort of 3 point or anything like that. So it just seems like a odd decision to put it in that moment. But as for Amiens, Adam, massive win and perfect time for the 2 players to be coming back. We've said how much they've missed Konate. We've said, I said previously that Godos needed to do a bit more, and now he's back from the African Cup of Nations. He picks up the assist as well. Are those 2 maybe just going to be enough for them to stay above the dotted line? You certainly think so, but they've still got a real, a running that, at the moment at least anyway, the next couple of games are going to be sort of stilting that momentum. Is that not maybe holding back on your optimism?
Perhaps you're right. There are obviously there are some Europe's. You're right. There are some difficult games to come, but I just think that Amiens have a very thin squad, and they have resources are minimal, and they're a national side. They got promoted two seasons in a row. Last season was their first Ligue season, and clubs like Amiens, they're sort of key players. Especially when you have such a close knit, such a small kind of squad that Christophe Pellissier has built. Those key players become ever more important. And Canate missed what sort of 14, 15 games, and Godos was away for 6 or 7 games over the winter with the Asian Cup. And those two players together, without them, they lost all their attacking edge, completely evaporated. They're the main assist provider and their main goal scorer, and they don't have the players to replace them. Perhaps other teams further at the table might not have equally good players, but they have better stand-ins. And I know that Cheg Tamiti, who came in from the youth ranks and did well in the team, but I don't know that he's a Ligue 1 striker just yet. Still 21. Juan Otero went off form a little bit. They've only obviously just signed Sergio Garassi, who looks decent, but was not particularly prevalent in the Colne side of late. And that kind of left them with just Steven Mendoza. So they couldn't get forward, they couldn't create chances, and they just kept being pushed back. And despite the fact they're still extremely organised, they're still very combative in midfield. They've got good individual defenders. I like Prince Guano, and I quite like Emil Kraft as well. And Guttner's a good keeper, but they just got overwhelmed because they just had no outball, no quality to keep the ball up the field. So with them in the team, I think they offer that. And Pellissier can go back to the very sort of intelligent, stoic performances, eking the best out of his squad with a cutting edge with Canate and Godos up front. So I think they'd be pretty confident of comfortably avoiding relegation from now on, from my point of view. But the tricky thing is that they do have a difficult run-in, as you mentioned, which is something that they can't legislate for, because obviously the period where they had those players, they played the games perhaps they would have wanted with their full team, and so it's obviously a little bit of an unbalance there. But I still think they're good enough to get enough points to see them through.
Absolutely. Looking at Monaco now, Jez, because there's still a few teams hovering around these relegation players, but Monaco, we mentioned again on the preview show that they needed to keep momentum going, and I even mentioned that a draw would be nice, but it will almost feel like a loss to them losing it so late on, and also for Jeremison to have a silly red card, really, in all honesty. I mean, he got a second yellow, but it could have quite easily been a red if the ref had looked at that on VAR afterwards. Again, they created a lot more. They were pretty unlucky with a couple of the chances. They were probably really unlucky with the first goal Montpellier get. It's a certain penalty, and that's just what may frustrate Jardim, that while a point at Montpellier is no mean feat at all, it's so close to being 3.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but there's definitely signs of big recovery, and I suppose that in a way, coming away from a draw at Montpellier, having scored a couple and feeling frustrated is arguably a good sign of where they're at right now. I don't really have any worries at all from Monaco. I mean, the first goal I thought was awful defending on their part, so that still needs to be tightened up. And then the second was a penalty after a bit of stupidity from Glick, which isn't the first time we've seen that this season. Subasic was, I suppose, depending on how generous you're being, was either unlucky or should have done a lot better with the penalty, which just crept over the line. But overall, things are a lot better, and I think Zakarian complained after the match that Monaco have basically got a completely new team, and after the January transfer market, and the market completely skews the league, and it's not fair. To a very large extent, I agree with him. I'm not sure I entirely do, just on the basis of this match, because although within the squad there were a lot of newbies, there weren't actually that many starting. If you know, players like Falcao, Golovin, with Subasic, they've only come back recently, but they were there the whole time. They were just injured. So I'm not sure that was entirely fair. But overall, I do agree with him. it's just the way it is. There's nothing you can do about it. But it does feel slightly unfair that they completely stuffed up in the summer, and they have the means that none of the teams around them do to completely start again from scratch, and we'll probably get out. Well, I think certainly we'll get out of it. Yeah, I mean, I could look at the fixtures they've got coming up. I really don't. I know it's a silly thing to say with them still, I think third from bottom, but I just don't see them as relegation candidates anymore.
No, and it's a fair point from Zakarian, but at the same time, I always think that signing 5, 6, 7 new players can be just as sort of destabilizing sometimes for some teams. I'm sure even if some of the teams around there had the means to bring in that many players, even if they were of decent quality, it always doesn't guarantee success, especially when you have to gel them in and it has to be immediate. I get his point a little bit, but I suppose it's football at the end of the day, unfortunately, at the moment. But a team that sort of frustrate as much as they excite, really. Sometimes Adam is Dijon at the moment. That we said after the win against Monaco that we thought maybe that might be their turning point, especially after the good results around that result as well. But they will be a little bit disappointed that they let that one slip against Marseille. They had a couple of good chances as well while it was still 1-0, when it was even 1-1 as well. And they always are usually a good side at home, but let that one slip away, and it doesn't really get much easier for them, really. But they got Nîmes away, they've Saint-Etienne, Lille, Rennes, PSG before facing Guingamp in sort of mid-March. It's not exactly the right time for them to be wanting to pick up points to start pulling away with Monaco on their heels.
No, indeed, and you're absolutely right. I mean, they could have got something from that Marseille game on Friday night. And a unfortunate loss at Angers the week before. They're just one of those teams that I think will be there or thereabouts in the relegation fight until the end of the season. Although I think, as I mentioned previously, the fact that Anton Kabare is their coach is a real positive. He should be able to. I would back him anyway to be able to find a way to make this team a little bit more solid, but still maintain some of those sort of attacking some of that attacking cohesion that they showed so much under Olivier Delalio. And I think it might be there's a lot of examples in football of managers inheriting a team and their players at one end of the pitch, either defensively or offensively, continue to use the same ideas that the previous manager had instilled. They're sort of hardwired in. And you would hope that, but then shifting the focus overall towards sort of the other end of the scale, and it sort of balances out. And I would hope that in some very small way, from Dijon's point of view, that happens. That players like Kwan and Sliti and Mehdi Abid and Samaritano, when he's fit, and Wesley Said, continue to play in that same very free flowing style when they can. But the team in general will be shifted towards a more defensive outlook, and hopefully that will balance out and be enough to make them a little bit more sort of balanced. So I think Kumkai is a really good choice of coach. But then saying this, then the spells at Lens didn't go well, got relegated to them. Guingamp as well, obviously this season probably would have got relegated under him too. So he's obviously not like the miracle survival coach, but I think it's a good fit, and I'd still bet them to be okay.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they do run that, what looks like a bit of a gauntlet for them, really. But we should wait and see. We'll save Nantes for this week. I think they're just about teetering on the edge, aren't they? And I know Halil Hodzic said earlier this week that it's been really hard for his players to concentrate, and no doubt about that. But the defeat of the weekend was a real hammer blow, really, because they were 2-0 up, and to slip up in the second half so dramatically, really, and quite poorly in the end, really. But you can't really blame the Canary players for having their minds elsewhere at the moment. But we'll move on to looking also at Europe, but I suppose a little bit later this week on Thursday, when Rennes will be in action for the first time in a long while, really, in the knockout stages of the Europa League as they take on Real Betis. It's a really interesting game, really, on this one. Jez, and Rennes prepared for it in a pretty good way, although some will say that sort of Saint-Etienne were folding beneath the eyes sort of in the last 5 or 10 minutes, but they have the flair. They have a couple of injury worries. Both Borrijo and Sivacho had to come off during the game, and a serious doubts, probably likely even to be out. But 3 wins on the trot at home and a 4th home game on the way. The omens are good, aren't they?
I think the omens are very good for them. I have to say, I know if Rich is listening, he's not going to be too impressed with what I'm going to say, but I sort of stand by what I said last week in the preview show. If you can't be good, be lucky. And I'm not saying that Rennes haven't been good and haven't been improved, but they seem to be having a really good run of luck, it seems to me, and possibly that sort of reached its peak against Saint-Etienne. And firstly, the fact that Villa and Kasri, coincidentally both ex-Rennes players, but both were suspended, and arguably, there's a case for saying they've been Saint-Etienne's 2 best players this season. The fact that they were out obviously helped, and then it did feel like a lot was going against them referee-wise. Then, great chance that was unlucky to come off the post. Subotic, okay, that's not luck on men's side, but Subotic missing an absolute sitter. It just feels like a lot is going Rennes' way at the moment, and then two very late goals to make the scoreline a lot more flattering than the way the match actually panned out for the most part. But all of that said, they are playing with a lot more solidity, a lot more sort of solidarity. They're looking more like a team. They're still occasionally looking like they're sort of not reliant, but players like Ben Arthur and Sarr, occasional sort of flashes of brilliance, are kind of making the difference. But I guess that's what a team's about, and the rest of the team is doing the business to make sure that when those players do those things like that, I'm sort of contradicting myself and kind of thinking aloud, because it always annoys me when people say, "Oh, they a lot of the sort of anti-Genesio brigade say that about Lyon. Oh, they're not playing like a team; they're relying on flashes of brilliance from their players." Well, that's what part of being a team is about. So, some of the teams should do their bit, making sure that they're keeping clean sheets or keeping the scoreline down or whatever, and then providing for those players who can do those flashes of brilliance. But I just feel like they're almost there, and the best way they're improving as a team, they're improving as a sort of as a group playing together, and if they're having the luck to get the results even while that's happening, then good for them. And arguably they and Marseille were the big winners of the weekend, in terms of how other results went around them. Obviously, Lyon and Saint-Etienne going down, and Montpellier only drawing. They're in a good place at the moment, but I'm still not 100% convinced it's purely based on how they're playing. I do feel that they're certainly having more than their slice of luck at the moment.
And we have talked previously about sort of their bounce back ability, because they were terrific to start under Stefan, and then in January it was a bit indifferent. There was a couple of losses here and there, and a couple of draws that maybe they felt should have been wins. But 3 on the bounce is nothing to shake a stick at, especially with how Saint-Etienne had been previously, although they've sort of fallen off a little bit since that Lyon result. But they faced Betis on Thursday night, Adam, who have been a bit indifferent themselves. I think some of the Spanish listeners would maybe claim them as a sort of Spanish Rennes almost, especially in recent weeks. I mean, they beat Atletico Madrid a couple of Sundays ago. They were winning against Valencia in the Copa del Rey, but the sort of classic Quique Setien overbearingness of going attack, sort of paid them dividends in the last couple of minutes. And then at the weekend, they had a man sent off and 3 goals let in against a Leganés side, doing relatively okay in Spain, but still disappointing, which they kind of brought the yin and the yang to them. And that's maybe where the positive may come from, Rand, that the Setien sides are all really great to watch and strong going forward, but there is always a weak side to them going the other way.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely where Rennes fans will sort of draw some hope from, because Quique Setien's Betis are an extremely interesting watch, and on their day a brilliant side. The win at the new camp, was it 4-3, I think, really underlined the fact that they, when they're on form, they really can play, and they've got a lot of interesting players. Giovanni Lo Celso's done really well since joining from PSG. He's been fantastic. Issa Mundi was at Rennes and is a stalwart for them, and having a great season as well. Sergio Canales had an absolutely fantastic year, doing really, really well for them. Playing on the right and through the middle, he's been fantastic. And I think that Rennes perhaps might have to sort of adapt their style a little bit to face Betis. And Betis, although they're a little up and down in the league, they've had a very good Europa League campaign so far, coming through a tough group, which I think was Olympiacos and AC Milan, if I remember rightly off the top of my head. So this kind of competition does suit them, seemingly. And I think that for Rennes to progress, then they're going to have to be very astute in the way they go about setting up their team. Juliet Zevon goes about setting up his team to play Betis here, over both legs, and they're going to have to find a way to sort of halt their sort of free flowing passing, high pressing, aggressive pressing style that they've got, because theoretically, it could be very, very dangerous against a side like Rennes. So it'd be a really interesting game, but a really tough tie for Rennes.
Yeah, it's certainly one to keep your eyes on. I think with Rennes getting players like Saar moving, and Hatem Ben Arfa has always been an entertaining watch, and I think Niang's starting to find a little bit of form as well now. He's playing a little bit more regularly. And you add in Betis, you've got, like you say, a couple of ex-Ligue players, and they can play such entertaining football themselves. It could be a real cracker. But sort of focusing back on Ligue matters, because obviously they're in that fight for the Europa League place, as we mentioned, Jez, and really, in all honesty, even though Lyon did lose, they're still 6 points ahead of Montpellier. So we'll sort of put that as the dividing line, and everyone fighting for that fourth place. And Montpellier, Levert, Marseille, Nice are all on the same points, with Rennes a point behind them. Strasbourg and Reims 2 points, 2 points off those teams on 37. But for Saint-Etienne to start off with, it ended up a little bit tempestuous, really. They like you say, Subotic has that great chance from a yard out that he spooned. Then Jean-Louis Gasset got sent to the stands, and then Hamuma had a silly yellow card in the very last couple of minutes to see red as well. Since that Lyon game, where we said they should have taken a lot of pride from how they performed, even though they did end up losing it, they've sort of fallen off a cliff, really. They managed to beat. They lost in the cup to Dijon. They drew against Nantes the other week, and they've had a little bit of a delay because of other suspended games, really. But 3-0 defeat to Rennes. Are the wheels maybe starting to fall off for them?
It's hard to say, because you'd hope that this isn't a reaction to the Lyon game, because they're really relatively unlucky to go down so late in the match. And okay, it hurts losing to your rival, but you shouldn't be allowing that to affect the rest of your season. I think they probably have been a little bit affected by the transfer window, a few ins and outs. Selnaes, who is another who's been particularly good this season, pushing for a move, which looks like it's likely to happen now. Fardo and Benacer coming in and having to acclimatise to a new team. As I said, a couple of important suspensions as well. So I think it's a mixture of factors. There definitely has been a dip in form. There's been external factors as well. And again, the fact that despite all of that, they're still fifth, with a game in hand over Marseille and Nice just below, and Rennes just below them, puts them in a good position. But certainly they need to turn their form around quite quickly, and it will be interesting to see what happens with Gasset and Hamuma. Gasset, I think it's quite uncharacteristic of him to sort of get sent off. So he must have had reason to be worked up. And Hamuma, again, frustration, but no excuse for it, and he will be a loss, because he's always been one of those, I think, underrated players within Ligue 1. He's had his injury niggles, but I think in recent weeks he's been possibly while Cabedas has had a little bit of a dip in form. I think Nuno's come a little bit more to the fore, and he could be a miss. So certainly they need to stop the slide, because they're absolutely still in touch. Of course they are, but the last 2-3 weeks have not been impressive. And even as you mentioned, the cup match, conceding 6 to Dijon is whichever players were fielded, that's not good. And even if it is just the cup and not their priority, that's got to affect their morale a little bit going into the league as well.
Absolutely, and it's a strange one. These teams on 37 are sort of in different points of form. Montpellier drew the game against Monaco and were pretty lucky, really, in all honesty. The penalties, a lucky one, like we mentioned, and other things going their way for that one to even manage the point. But both of those two have a game in hand as well to try and catch up with Lyon and also maybe insert themselves as Europa League contenders. But the other teams below them, and we'll start with Marseille, really, Adam, have sort of made a case in the last couple of weeks to improve, because Marseille, after what has been sort of an atrocious time for them, have got 2 wins in a row, which is sort of an oddity that it's taken so long to get to this stage. But at the same time, while there have been 2 wins, they've been a little bit unremarkable, is maybe the best way of saying it. But a win's a win at the moment.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that they'll sort of take any win they can get, given how poor their form has been. Before those 2 wins, I think they had 1 win since that win at Amiens in November, which is November the 25th, I think, which is a considerable amount of gains for a club like Marseille. You know, they dropped back into mid-table, but they've been pretty fortunate in that above them, perhaps Lille aside, there hasn't really been a form team. And that from Angers and Bordeaux up to 3rd place, 4th place, Montpellier at the moment, as you mentioned, none of those teams have really put a run together, and they've all sort of concertina. They're sort of bunched up, and no one's really got away from them. All right, they might not go Champions League football this season. There's still a 6-point gap to Lyon. I mean, it's possible, but you don't have to argue that Lyon are a far better team than Marseille this season. But they in another year, perhaps they could have been left behind entirely, and they could be struggling to even make the top 5, which looks like it would be the Europa League and positions this season. Even now, it's still going to be tough. I think, you know, Saint-Etienne and Montpellier, Rennes, if they can somehow manage both that and Europa League, are going to be pretty tricky. But they seem to have sort of overcome that at least in terms of results, that blip. And unremarkable or not, I think both wins in the last week away at Dijon and at home to Bordeaux will prove pretty crucial. I think it's as long as Marseille are winning, you know, that'll at least sort of appease the fans to some extent. If they're getting decent enough results, regardless of the style of play, although obviously the fans demand a good start, a positive and exciting style of play, at least it lifts that kind of the velodrome being sort of sucking all the life out of the team and it being a bit of a cavernous kind of stadium and sort of gets on top of their players. As long as they're sort of performing relatively well, that negates that, which is a huge issue for them when they do get into that situation when they play poorly, that the fans get on top of them and it really sucks the life out of the team. And if they can avoid that, then that's a quite a big positive. And you could argue that they may even be favourites for 4th now, given that Montpellier's form's up and down, and whether they can sustain the same number of points they got in the first half of the year. Saint-Etienne, as we mentioned, a little bit unsure. I don't think Nice are good enough to finish in the top 5 unless you know they sort of hit Montpellier or Saint-Etienne at the end, maybe. And Rennes are going to struggle with the Europa League. So you could argue that Marseille will probably finish 4th pretty comfortably now. But it's whether they can maintain this slightly improved level of results, because the opposite, you know, it spirals out of control pretty quickly.
And I think the next 5 games are absolutely massive. I mean, they've got Amiens at the weekend, which, you know, they might want to keep up the momentum, but that's a game that they expect to win. And then 3 games against teams around them in Rennes, Saint-Etienne and Nice. You know, pick up wins there, and you start to sort of separate yourselves away just before the big one when they face Le Classique in Paris as well against their bitter rivals. Sort of mentioning the team just below them that Adam touched on there in Nice, Jez, and we sort of mentioned on the preview show that it sort of came to fruition. The prediction that we had is that Patrick Vieira wouldn't stand for his team having a 4-0 defeat at Lille and would have expected a reaction, much like we expected Lyon to be back up a great win against a tough opponent with a bit of a blip. But credit to Nice, they defended well, they put bodies on the line, they certainly showed a lot more character than they did the week before, and nicked what could be a vital 3 points.
I think the stat is that Lyon had 52 shots over the two matches against Nice, and Nice came out 1-0 winners in both. And it's something that you kind of, in a way, you come to expect from both teams now. The way Lyon, I think the last couple of years, have been that kind of team who, one week beat PSG and the next week lose to Nice, and this year's Nice under Vieira, they're not necessarily the best to watch, but what you need to do is look at their defensive record. Only 23 conceded, and you consider that 12 of them have been in 3 matches, 3 with 4-goal defeats. They're just very solid, and we've said before that the problem is that they don't have an out-and-out striker, or certainly a competent or sort of fully formed one. They've got a couple of young raw players, but they don't have a reliable goal scorer. It must be particularly galling for them seeing Balotelli scoring 2 and 3. I think it's quite clear that he just couldn't have cared less and was pretty negligent in his attitude at Nice. But as long as you're keeping a clean sheet and you're tied to the back, then you've always got a chance to win the match. And it was a penalty. To be honest, I don't really know what Rennes does apart from score very good penalties, but that was enough for him this match. And you can't really argue with it. Lyon didn't put their chances away. Nice put their one decent chance away, and there's definitely a bit of hubris there with Lyon's official account tweeting about their 5-0 win last year just before the match, which I would be surprised if that was brought up in the changing room at some point as well. And that's what Nice are about this year, and I hope that the new ownership stick with Vieira and give him a chance and invest properly in the summer for him, because I think he really is showing that he has the makings of a very good manager. And it probably should be noted as well that it's those 4-goal defeats that Nice have suffered this season. All 3 of them, they've come back immediately with a win, and actually 2 of them now are against Lyon. So it certainly shows, as you said, partly that Vieira probably has got a good line in hairdryer treatment in the changing rooms, but also that the team themselves have got a lot of character and bounce back ability. And considering that for the most part they're still a very young team, I think that bodes well going forward.
Yeah, well, there was never any doubt that Vieira was going to give them a good kick up the backside, and at least they showed off what they could do. And it's going to make an interesting race for that Europa League spot, because there's a couple of teams still chasing it as well. Let's finish off with my favourite segment, at least, and that's our Liga and snapshots. And I'll start with you this evening, Adam. And what's your news from the Liga this week that maybe we've missed out?
As perhaps unsurprisingly, I thought I'd have a quick look at Angers, because the win this weekend went a little bit under the radar. But for a team like Angers, to with the players that are injured, Pierre Capel, Flavien Tate, Jeff-René Adelaide, who 3 of the most important players, to go to Strasbourg and win was a really mightily impressive result. And the thing that got me about it is that it was sort of in classic Stéphane Moulin style, in that he sort of ekes the best out of a workmanlike looking team, minimal resources, and they continually stay up pretty comfortably, and in mid-table even without many worries at all. And the thing that summed it up was the fact that Wilfried Kanga scored both goals. He's a really young striker, was at PSG and wasn't even anywhere near the first team at PSG, obviously, and left and joined Angers, and he really hasn't been impressive at all. Really, he's been pretty much on the fringes and a bit away when he came into the team, and that was kind of summed up last week when on as a sub for the last 10 minutes, he skied an open goal opportunity really to make it 2-0 against Dijon, and he sort of collapsed to the ground, and you could understand his frustration. And for him to start this week and to score both goals, it just really shows what a good man manager and what a good how good Moulin is at getting the best out of his players. For him to sort of turn up and be the match winner this week and turn it around, and two very good little finishes, a really nice little sort of reactive header from another player who Moulin is getting the best out of, Abdoulaye Bamba, who brilliant little hooked cross in for him to head home, and then a great ball from Shaken Doy, another Moulin player, signed from Crete before he went off to Birmingham, didn't work out and came back, and he's been great since he came back, and nice little through ball, and Kanga sort of slotted one home. So classic Moulin performance against one of the teams that we've been praising so highly so far this season. So, more power to Moulin, and he deserves more credit.
Yeah, he does this a lot, doesn't he? I mean, 7 points from the last 9 and 3 wins out of the last 5 as well. Just shows you Moulin just knows how to get the results just when Angers seem to need them. Jez, what's your Ligue snapshot?
Mine's a finish as well, as I'm talking about, and finishes there. Jordan Ferry has not always been, again, he's a bit of a maligned character when he was at Lyon, and isn't exactly known for his finishing. But in Nîmes' comeback at Nantes, Bobichon probably scored the pick of the goals, but I liked Ferry's goal. Really good shot from distance with his right foot, which was unlucky to come off the post, but he showed brilliant awareness and movement to be in the right place to pick up his own rebound, still from the edge of the area, and score with his left foot instead. It was, in a way, reminiscent, not really, but in a way, of Pogba's goal in the World Cup final, where he had a shot with one foot that was blocked and scored with the other. But I just thought it was a cute finish from a player you wouldn't really expect to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a really nice reaction finish, wasn't it? One that I felt a little bit sorry for the Nantes players for, because they didn't defend greatly, but that one was something you can't really do anything about when the ball ricochets straight back to him, but a great reaction from the Lyon player. And good to see him playing some good football at Nîmes, who are really striding at the moment, really. They're always good to watch, and they're good to see that they almost look certainties to be in Liga next season as well. That's all for us this evening. My thanks to Adam, Jez, and all of you listening at home. Do join us for the preview show on Thursday with all those results from Europe. And the main show will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.